into summer here. The sky is definitely looking a little bit more like June and July. And the storms, instead of being out to our west and northwest, they're out to the southeast. So anyway, we can certainly send the drone up to take a look at things, and we'll do more of those little radar and visual comparisons. Those are pretty fascinating. So here's what things look like across the U.S. this evening. And green outlines the dew points. So you can see there's a bit of a dew point max around Memphis, up to about Paducah, and then back across the Ozarks, and then into northeast Oklahoma. And that's been responsible for some strong thunderstorms in parts of Arkansas today. Also, the moisture is a little bit weaker in Georgia and Alabama, but they've certainly had some thunderstorm activity in that area. Up in the northeast, frontal system moving through the Great Lakes. And when we look at the fronts, instead of focusing on the lows, what we want to do is look at the high pressure areas that are associated with that cold front. The cold front is not really driven by the low pressure center. It's driven by a high somewhere out to the west or northwest. So in this case, we just got a weak 1016 millibar high there over Iowa. That's typical of what we see this time of year. And that actually connects up to the north as a ridge all the way up to western Ontario. Out in the Canadian prairies, we do have some low pressure out in that region. Due to the very warm temperatures, we've got a little bit of a heat low in that area, just kind of a stagnant weather pattern. And then on the west coast, there's a cold front, and let's look at the high pressure area. There it is, off the coast. 1020 millibars, that's pretty strong. So definitely some cold air coming into the northwestern U.S. right there. Out in the southwestern U.S., we've got the heat low set up over the Pahrump and Vegas area right there. And that's typically where we find it. It's usually somewhere between Phoenix, Las Vegas, Bakersfield, and then back towards Yuma. That's typically where we find it during the summer months. And out to the south, we're starting to get a little bit of a monsoon pattern trying to get established there in New Mexico, and we've actually got a tropical system off the coast of Baja California. We'll look at that on the satellite. So here's what things look like in Texas on the mesoscale. It definitely is a little bit drier. Dew points falling off into the upper 50s in Dallas, so no wonder we don't have very widespread thunderstorm activity. But up there at Altus, 65. Moisture's a little bit higher up there in Oklahoma, and we've also got a couple of outflow boundaries up in that area. Here's what we got for tropical activity. NHC monitoring this little disturbance here around Cancun. And the 5-day showing it to move into the Bay of Campeche and far western Gulf of New Mexico, or Gulf of New Mexico. Yeah, I don't think we have one of those. And then taking a look out west, we've got Tropical Storm Bud there. And this is going to be kind of significant because the path of that is going to take it northward towards northwest Mexico, New Mexico, and southeast Arizona. Now, typically we have to watch these when they make this kind of movement because very often they have significant amounts of moisture, and we could get very intense flooding in this area. But I will tell you, as a preview, there's not much moisture associated with this system, so the effects will be kind of minimal in the southern Rockies. All right, let's move ahead and look at the NHC graphics. NHC hasn't had a whole lot to do, but they do have a couple of severe thunderstorm watches in the northeast U.S. trying to bring this up. There we go. You can see that up there in New York and Pennsylvania right there. And that's along that front coming out of the Great Lakes. Some storms on the high plains in Colorado, very weak cells out in that area. And then looks like another little area up there in Iowa. I'm not too sure what's causing that. I guess we can bring up the surface plots, see what's going on in Iowa. I'm kind of compelled to understand what is causing each one of these little weather systems, and we probably had a bit of a boundary there in old MCS, possibly. That with, let's see, yeah, moisture is a bit on the weak side, a little higher down in this part of Iowa, but pretty much everywhere in Kansas, Nebraska, we got southeast winds and low dew points in that area. So this is actually kind of a anticyclonic flow in this area, and I guess we just have just enough instability and a lack of a cap to get things going in Iowa. All right, turning to the upper levels, let's go up to 250 millibars, and we'll examine the steering flow, and we can see that the upper level ridge is mostly in Old Mexico. It's not making much progress into Texas and the Four Corners, so we do have westerly flow across that region. So that's helping to prevent temperatures from getting too extreme. And then up to the north, we've got the polar front jet coming into Washington, out towards the Great Lakes, where it's especially strong, and a bit of troughing in that area there. 700 millibars checking in on the cap strength. Great Plains is pretty well capped. Not too strong, though. We're only looking at about 12 Celsius from North Platte all the way down to Amarillo. So usually in June, 12 Celsius, that's getting to be about right around the moderate cap strength. If it was April or May, that would be pretty strong, but we've got very intense solar heating, so not much of a problem getting storms going. And there's the Goodland radar. We can see that these cells are not particularly strong. Very weak reflectivity gradients. The cores are right in the middle of the cells themselves. And let's roll that back just a little bit and see what happened. They looked a little bit better earlier, about an hour ago. Probably would have had a good view right around this area, and then looks like these cells are just kind of outflowish. And in fact, you can see the outflow boundary right there. See if that shows up on spectrum width. Not so much there. Let's try base velocity. And there we can kind of see the lopsided appearance of the velocity field. Right around the radar itself, the clear air field showing south to north winds. Green is always inbound and red is always outbound. So basically in the low levels we've got south flow through that entire area, but when we look at that outflow boundary area right out here, that's showing flow towards the radar. So that's the outflow boundary surging into the Colorado-Kansas county line area. Velocities along that outflow boundary not too strong. Looking only about 15 to 20 knots. Granted, this is up at about 2,000 feet, but if we were looking at very gusty outflow, we would probably see that more on the order of 30 to 40 knots. 850 millibar flow indicating the low-level moisture in the low-level jet. Showing 40 knots this morning there in Amarillo, but moisture is on the weak side, anywhere from 11 to 13 Celsius. So those are going to be low to mid-50s dew points. And then up to the north we can see a 850 millibar front. See those northerly winds right there? That's probably would help to get that stuff going in Iowa. That front probably stalled out and started moving up to the north. Thickness and isobars. There we go. Pretty strong gradient right there in Oregon and Washington. So there's a bit of a blob of cold air right there in the eastern Pacific, and it looks like the leading edge of that cold air is roughly like that from about Boise out to about Klamath Falls and Redding. And then the corresponding warm front appears to run something about like that right there. And that probably connects back into that Iowa system, somewhere out in that area right there. So there's the high pressure area, and then taking a look out east. Weak front coming through Pennsylvania into Virginia. It looks like the warm front is moving north through Maine, right in that area there. So a lot of times this time of year, these fronts, as they move east, they'll lay down these boundaries that are kind of east-west, and that'll help to generate storms in places like Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and Georgia. So Willie Greenway out there in Georgia, probably seeing a bit of that there. And then down to the south, we can see that tropical storm moving north. That's Bud there coming into the Gulf of California. All right, this is probably a good time to look at satellite, and this is the water vapor imagery. Very stagnant flow and a lot of thunderstorm activity dumping moisture into the upper parts of the tropopause, or troposphere, giving us this heightened moisture pattern right here across the Mississippi River Valley. And in fact, the only dry air is down in the South Texas area, close to that upper level ridge right there. And out to the northeast U.S. right there, there's some of that dry air coming in from Canada on the back side of that front. Okay, so let me go ahead and set this visible image into motion. And I appreciate College DuPage there for these satellite products, very excellent GOES-R imagery, and they've got an outstanding weather program there. About 10 years ago, I did a conference there, and I talked to some of the people that run that weather program there, and definitely a first-class act there. David Lumbert reporting in from Maumelle, Arkansas. Thunderstorms. One lightning fatality. Current weather 75 over 72. Ryan Toomey's rainy and hot in South Florida. Now let me give you the Florida image. Slow that down just a little bit there. Okay, very good. Yeah, so lots of boundaries there in Florida. Sea breezes and old convective outflow boundaries giving us numerous storms in that area. So it's good to see Florida is not in a drought. Cool in the Santa Barbara area from Michelle Curlin. Humid in the Banana Belt. S. Andrew Walters catching a live viewing. Playing catch-up for about a month. Well, good to have you here. Carl Berghoff, welcome to the webcast, and Ryan reporting high 80s there in Florida. Adam Davis, Bedford, Indiana, had a storm between there and Bloomington that looked like it was going to put on a show. Got Burl H here, and Erica Baker, Coffeyville reporting 90 over 74 there in southeast Kansas. Oh, okay, yeah, Carl Berghoff mentioning the voice audio. Yeah, I was told that the audio sounds kind of weird, and I'm looking at, I forgot to do those tests. I should have done that, because I don't really know what's causing that. Let me try to reset the microphone input just a second here. The levels look okay. All right, well, just bear with me, and I'll run some tests later tonight and find out what's going on. Maybe there's something that's kind of configured weird here. I'll bring up the volume just a little bit. Oh, okay, yeah, volume level does look a little bit low. This is what I'm looking at here, and I can see those levels. Yeah, they're running a little bit low. I think maybe Windows might have messed with the levels. So let me take care of that real quick. Okay. Got to go into the devices here. Okay, give me just a second here. Yeah, everything is different in Windows 10. I have problems trying to find my way around in here. Input device, Rodin T. There it is. There it is. This is where I set the levels, and they do look a little bit low. All right. Oh, now it's really maxing out there. Okay. Well, let me know if that sounds a little bit better. And I can see, yeah, this is looking a little bit better here. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know if there's distortion or flanging or something else going on, but the levels, I think, are looking a little bit better. All right. So, let me get my mixer back where it belongs, where I can keep an eye on it. I think it might be a little bit hot. Let me bring that down just a little bit. Okay. So, let's get back into our show. Low pitched like a filter. Okay. Yeah, that was from earlier. Thomas Copeland joining us. Megan John mentioning that audio. And I do appreciate the audio feedback. We don't want to go an hour into a show with things difficult to hear. Willie Greenway there in Georgia. Lots of storms in that area. Hello to Ron Chalfant, Trent Tubazuski. Electric Dog says it sounds better. Good. Okay. Yeah, ask Andrew Walters. Thank you. Sagan's Run. Ryan, thank you. Tim's makes me feel like Luke Skywalker. Yeah, that's a quote I should use on my website there. Ryan Toomeys, doesn't sound like you had dental surgery now. Okay, yeah, so the problem we had Monday, I don't know what was causing that. Maybe the levels were just a little bit low. Sagan's Run, Michelle Kurland, Carl Burkhoff, and Ron, and Adam Davis. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and go into the rest of the forecast. And I've got a couple of satellite images. So you've seen this one right here. Let's take a look at Oklahoma. So they've had some thunderstorm activity. So what caused that? Let's go back earlier in the day, and we had an MCS moving across Kansas. This is about noon. And you can see that distinctive high based anvil, very little in the way of cumulus tops. So that tells me there's kind of a decaying mesoscale system in that area. And looks like another one decaying out in the panhandles. So very likely throughout this area there's probably some fresh boundaries. So we run that forward during the afternoon. And we can see one cumulus field coming together around Wellington, Kansas, out towards Medicine Lodge, and another one right here around, I guess that would be just south of Enid. And the cumulus clouds start looking a lot more vertical there in Oklahoma. So we know that that one's about to fire, and then we're keeping an eye on these here. So let's roll that forward a little bit more. Well, the Oklahoma stuff gets going, but you can see that in Kansas, those towers have kind of died away. And we're getting on the backside of that that cirrus field, so there's probably a little bit of subsidence now starting to work on that area of Kansas. As the day goes on, some very stout convection there in Oklahoma, all the way from about Clinton down to Altus and down to about Knox City. And the air mass has kind of a hazy look across much of that area too. There's a look at our system out there in the Mexico area. There's Bud. It's got kind of a very wide eye, but the circulation is kind of broad and weak. And so here's what it looked like earlier in the day. So got kind of a northward drift, and lots of showers and thunderstorms across Mexico there. So there's what that looks like. So we're going to be seeing that move northward over the next couple days, and we'll follow that as it goes into the Arizona, New Mexico area. And I think that's about all the satellite images I have. I went to the University of Wisconsin Dvorak technique site. I was going to see if it had anything on bud, and they don't. And by the Dvorak technique, that's a technique where they look at the infrared imagery, and they look at the extent of cold tops and what kind of pattern there is and how well it surrounds the storm. And then they can come up with a very rough intensity estimate. And you can see that the enhanced tops around bud they're indicating kind of a warm, very warm convective tops, indicating that it's kind of weak. So on that very last image right there, there's a lot of gaps where the cloud tops are really not that strong. And if you compare that to the tops that we see on the Great Plains, and let me move that up there. So we'll take this up to about the Colorado area. All of that thunderstorm activity is definitely producing some sort of color enhancement. So that kind of shows you how weak bud is. So even on the weakest storms, like around Cheyenne, they're putting out some green and yellow coloring, indicating very cold tops. All right. So let's go ahead and I guess we'll look at a couple of soundings. Let's do that real quick. Now that we've got a pretty good idea what's happening synoptic-wise, here's the Fort Worth sounding. We've just had a few scattered thunderstorms in the area, very scattered, almost isolated. And part of that is because of the very weak moisture profile. We've got dew points right around 60 at the surface, falling off into the lower 50s and upper 40s, up around 5,000 to 8,000 feet. So a good representative mixing ratio line is going to be right there. We go parallel to these purple lines, and from that we take the afternoon high and find out where they intersect, bring the temperature up along the dry adiabat, and that gives us the lifted condensation level. So that's going to be up at about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. That's pretty high. And from there we go up along the moist adiabat, and that's given us a very skinny cape profile, very tall and thin. So that's probably on the order of about 500 to 800 capes. So we're definitely not going to get any significant severe out of something like that. Where they have had some much more extensive thunderstorm activity would be Atlanta. So here's what Atlanta looks like this evening, and let's take a look at the lowest 150 millibars. That's going to be this layer right here, and we can see that the mixing ratio is a lot higher than what we have at Dallas. Remember, Dallas was just above 10. Yeah, right, just above 10. This was Dallas. They were way over here. So the moisture is definitely a lot higher there in Georgia. And then we do our LCL, and that's a lot lower, about 4,000 feet, and then our Cape is looking quite a bit higher there. That would be on the order of about maybe 1,500 to 1,700 there in Georgia. Let's go to Washington, D.C. They've had a couple of showers roll through the area this afternoon. There has been a little bit of dry air moving through that area. So we take 86 degrees and figure out our LCL, and we're going to come up with kind of a lifted parcel lift like that. So LCL is going to be up about 7,000, and then our lift is going to be like that. So tall skinny cape again, a little bit of capping, and let's go up to the north through the front. That'll take us up to Buffalo, New York. A little bit of moisture hanging on in that area, but you can see there's a little bit of warmer air aloft. And let's go up to northern Michigan. Lots of dry air in that region, and with warm mid-level temperatures, there's pretty much no chance of thunderstorm activity in that area. So there's your lift there for northern Michigan, and that's a complete absence of cape in that area. So I'm taking a peek over here to see if anybody has dropped off out of boredom, and it's been going up. Okay, good. So I'll probably quit the skew-ts while the getting's good and head into the forecast. So let's do that. Okay, for our forecast, I like to use the high-resolution rapid refresh to start out with tonight and tomorrow morning. So we've had a few thunderstorms out around parts of East Texas, of course, also in the higher terrain, a few thunderstorms in that area. So we roll that forward. Yeah, pretty good complex there in Arkansas, actually. Everything will be dying off as we get towards midnight. Some of the stuff in the panhandles, due to that westerly flow in the upper levels, will probably help support some of that activity there in the Amarillo area, probably till about 3 or 4 in the morning. Even that will die out around dawn. So tomorrow morning, we're just going to have the usual tail of the Bermuda High in this area right here, and that'll be bringing up southerly flow into the southern plains. For the central plains, here's what things look like right now. There's those orographically produced thunderstorms heading east. I guess maybe not. Yeah, I guess a lot of it is orographic. Some of it on the Palmer Divide there, and all of that dies out around 1 to 2 in the morning. Except down here in Texas where there's a little bit more upper air support and probably a little bit more low-level moisture. Then by tomorrow morning, things are dry on the Great Plains. One little MCS up there in Iowa. And that's about it for that area. Now, this time of the year, I like to look at the 200 millibar chart. This is going up a little bit higher than the traditional 500 millibar heights and vorticity. So we can kind of use this to assess the position of the subtropical high. And it looks like it's pretty far south there in Mexico. And there's that westerly flow coming out into Texas. A little bit of a subtropical jet through that area, helping to support those storms. And then the pattern over the next couple of days, some troughing in the western U.S. Of course, that troughing doesn't tend to mean much for the southern plains. Every time we've gotten a trough in the past month, it just lifts northwest and we don't really get anything. And that's probably going to be the case once again. A little bit of ridging across Texas, so it will stay a little bit on the warm side. But out in the Gulf, you can see a little bit of a disturbance making an appearance on Friday. So going into the weekend, things do get active out in the Great Basin and Central Rockies. That'll mean more showers and thunderstorms for the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Wyoming. And we'll just be kind of high and dry here in Texas and Oklahoma underneath that ridge, except for the fact that this disturbance is going to be sneaking northward. And that's going to be bringing some serious moisture north into the Gulf Coast. So maybe around Saturday or Sunday, we're going to see precip chances go up in that area. So there it is, easterly flow coming on shore, but where we can really see it is on the precipitable water. And there it is right there. So starting out at the current time, you can see that We've got these purple shadings. That's indicating about 1.5 inches. And let's roll this forward. Well, for one, we can see that Bud is making its way northward. And then out in the Bay of Campeche, we've got that other system. And then as we get into the weekend, you can see Bud there making landfall. And somewhere out in the Gulf are disturbances showing up. But you can also see the violet colors, the very light lavender violet showing up, indicating 2-inch amounts. So this is where the moisture really starts getting cranked up there. And that makes it up onto the Gulf Coast around Sunday. Meanwhile, looks like Bud has been shredded by the mountains, and not much moisture with that, so looks like the precipitation in that area, southern Rockies, probably will be kind of scattered with that landfall. And then out in Texas, here comes that moisture into the Texas region with very deep southerly flow coming in. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get next week with that drone footage. Of course, I'll have to stay inside if it's raining, but we might see some interesting tropical thunderstorm activity with that drone. And there we can see a sliver of white. That's 2.5-inch amounts coming into the Corpus Christi and San Antonio area for Tuesday. So it looks like kind of a rainy pattern for the start of next week in Texas and Oklahoma. So even the upper level ridge is not able to keep that all suppressed. And then up in Kansas, it looks like boundaries. And here's another way to look at the boundaries. Temperature anomaly. Let me get a drink here. Now in previous weathercasts, I've shown you that we can use temperature anomaly to track fronts. It's also good for tracking air masses. So let's start that out and kind of see how things look. Looks like some very cold air up there in the Northwest Territories and northern Alberta. So that could make its way southward. Also some cold air in Washington and Oregon. So we roll that forward, and you can see that there's kind of a problem with this temperature anomaly. As we roll forward, there's kind of flickering. Like during the daytime, we get blue here in Arizona. And then at nighttime, we get red. So as we roll that forward, it's kind of hard to kind of see what's going on here. So what I've done is I've extracted the temperature anomaly only for a certain time of the day, right around midnight. And this is what it looks like. Get that queued up here. So now we're only looking at 06Z temperature anomaly. And this will give us a more consistent idea of what's happening. So let me just kind of roll this forward. Yeah. So now you can see that there's less of that flickering. And you can kind of see the progression of the surface systems from west to east. So, starting out, there's that cold air there in the Yukon, and we can kind of trace a little bit of a front through this area right here. And then going into Friday and Saturday, looks like that front is coming out into Montana, Idaho, and northern California. Coming out into the Dakotas for Saturday. And then it looks like it kind of stalls out right in the Minnesota, Nebraska area around Sunday. And then we can kind of see the depressed temperatures in New Mexico with the remains of Bud. So a little bit of mid and upper level cloud across that area, keeping the temperatures down. And then down in Texas, we also see this area right here of depressed temperatures. And that's associated with that flow of tropical air coming northward. So at least for a couple of days, the temperatures are going to be below normal and probably a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity in that area. Here comes a cold front coming south through the Great Plains, and that means more boundaries for this area. So probably by midweek, we're going to have likely some MCSs and weather systems affecting that area from the Central Plains all the way to the Midwest. And then, let's see, late in the week, don't see really much in the way of organized systems. Looks like some regeneration of polar air in Montana for the 24th. That's probably indicating maybe a high in that area. And then for the next day on the 25th, that's a pretty good push of cold air coming out. And then for Tuesday, that comes out of the Central Plains. So that's going to be more boundaries and maybe more shower activity there in Kansas, Missouri, and some of the surrounding areas. And if we get into a strong northwesterly flow pattern, that could mean nighttime convection for Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. So we'll just have to see what happens. This is 300 hours out. That's definitely getting into crystal ball territory. All right, so we'll go ahead and put it together. Let me go back to the charts. We'll just give you the GFS. Okay, so rolling that forward, you can see Bud coming up there in the Gulf of California. There's kind of a weak southerly flow coming onto the Texas coast, and we're going to see that really start picking up as we get into the beginning of next week. So you want to compare this to what it's going to look like in a couple days. Up to the north, that cold front is coming south. There's the remnants of Bud coming up into the Chihuahua and Bisbee and Deming area. So a little bit of a shot of maybe a few showers there in El Paso and Gallup and Albuquerque for Saturday, but that should clear out pretty quickly. And now in Texas, you can see things are kind of picking up here. There's a bit of a surface low right there off the coast of Corpus Christi on Sunday. And now you can see the pressure gradient there on the Texas Gulf Coast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pressure lines. And that's going to bring the moisture all the way up from Yucatan and Belize and the Caribbean. And here comes our next cold front from the northern plains. Going to produce some precip in that area for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we'll just kind of forward into the end of next week. Some pretty good MCSs there in Kansas. And what I'm looking for is the next big change. Looks like it's kind of stagnant there. Lots of rain for northern Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. And it looks like the next big change is on the 25th, 26th with that next cold front coming in from western Canada right there. And very likely with that deep tropical fetch coming into Texas, looks like a lot of opportunities for precip there late in the month. So it looks like things aren't going to quite shut down and go into July with clear skies and stagnant weather. I think we'll have a lot to look at. So that's a bit of good news there. All right. So I think that's about all I have for tonight. Let me take one last look at chat, see what's going on. All right, probably not going to be able to read all of the chat. It's pretty active in there, but I appreciate all the comments. Ron Chalfant says Bud peaked yesterday as a Cat 4, and this morning was a Cat 1. Okay, very good. Carl Burkhoff says, remember to leave a like. What book would you recommend for learning skew-t? Possibly the Instability Skew-t and Hodograph Handbook, although the Weather Analysis and Forecasting Handbook is probably a little bit better for a beginner. So I appreciate the help with that, guys. And Andrew Walters says, going to pick up the scraps of the southern edge of that trough down there in Texas. Ryan says Florida is staying wet and rainy. Bobby says, one thing about a drought, it makes the ridge stronger and keeps the jet stream up to the north. And Carl says, let's get those likes up. And I appreciate that. All right, yeah, okay, that's about all I got for tonight. So thank you for watching, and maybe we'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.